When my daughter came back from a family visit, she whispered, "Auntie told me to wait in the parking lot while they went to the toy store." She'd been there for 4 hours by herself. I didn't yell. I drove straight to the house, walked in, and without thinking twice, when my daughter came back from a family visit, she leaned close and told me in a low voice that her aunt said she had to stay in the parking lot while they went into a toy store, and she'd been left there alone for 4 hours. I didn't yell or panic out loud, but something inside me snapped as soon as Lily said it. We were standing near the trunk with snow drifting down slow and quiet, like the world had no clue what was about to break loose. She had her little overnight bag in one hand and her stuffed fox tucked under her arm, looking worn out. At first I figured it was normal kid exhaustion from too much candy, late nights, and running around with cousins for nearly a week. That kind of tired makes sense after 5 days with relatives. I helped her into the back seat, buckled her in, and we pulled away. I was chatting with my wife about the leftover ham my mom promised to send home when Lily spoke again, so softly I almost missed it. She said her aunt told her to wait in the car while they went to the toy store. I blinked and caught her eyes in the rearview mirror, asking what she meant, but she wouldn't look back at me. She stared out the window and explained they said they'd be quick, but it got dark and she stayed in the car. She played games until her tablet died. Then she got cold but didn't open the door because she was scared, thinking maybe they just forgot her. Then she added, barely louder than a breath, that her aunt told her not to tell us or it would ruin Christmas. That was the exact second everything went red. I wanted to spin the car around, march into my sister Megan's warm, perfect house, and make her sit alone in a freezing parking lot for hours with nothing but her phone and her own selfish thoughts. No coat, no snacks, no comfort. Just the same silence my kid endured, while someone she trusted forgot about her. For hours. My daughter sat alone in a parked car while Megan wandered toy aisles with her own kids like nothing was wrong. I didn't shout at Lily or let her see what was happening inside me. I just looked at my wife and told her to drive to Megan's house. The quiet in the car was heavy and suffocating. My wife could tell something was very wrong. I was shaking, not crying, just trembling, my hands clenching and unclenching in my lap while pressure burned behind my eyes that I refused to let out yet. 20 minutes later we pulled up to Megan's place, the kind of house you see in a holiday catalog with twinkling porch lights, a wreath on the door, fake snow dusted along the windows. From inside came music, laughter, and the clatter of plates. Megan's boys were yelling about a Nerf gun. I didn't knock. I opened the door and walked in like I belonged there. My mom was frosting cupcakes in the kitchen, my dad half asleep in his recliner, and Megan was stretched out on the couch in those stupid fuzzy socks she buys every year after Halloween. Her husband was pouring hot cider into mugs, and torn wrapping paper was already everywhere. She looked up, smiled, and said we were early. I didn't answer. I walked straight to her, grabbed that messy blonde bun she always twists up when she doesn't bother washing her hair, and yanked her off the couch. She screamed, a mug shattered on the floor, and my mom gasped as Megan dropped to her knees before she could even react. I didn't let her speak. I slapped her hard across the face, open hand, full force, the sound cracking through the living room like a gunshot. She scrambled back, clutching her cheek while her husband moved forward in shock, but my wife stepped between us, making it clear no one was touching me. My dad stood up confused and demanded to know what the hell was happening. I stared at Megan on the floor, breathing hard, and said she left my daughter alone in a freezing car for 4 hours. The room went dead still and then chaos hit. My mom dropped the cupcake tray, metal slamming against tile as frosting splattered everywhere, and she didn't even look down. My dad stood there slow and stiff, like he knew deep down this wasn't a misunderstanding. Megan stayed on the floor holding her face, staring at me like I'd lost my mind, looking embarrassed more than afraid, like I'd ruined her perfect living room moment. Then she spoke, calm and detached, saying Lily was fine and everything was under control. My wife shifted beside me, silent but braced, and when I stepped forward she lightly grabbed my arm to keep me from lunging again. I wasn't planning to hit her again, but one more comment like that might have changed things. Megan stood up, brushed off her leggings and glanced around the room like she expected support. She said Lily had a tablet, the car window was cracked, it wasn't that cold, and they weren't gone that long, adding that Lily didn't even cry. I just stared at her and asked if she understood what she'd done, reminding her she left a 7-year-old alone in a car in December for hours. Megan scoffed, crossed her arms and said it wasn't 4 hours, maybe 2, and that she checked on Lily after the first store and everything was fine. That familiar pressure flared behind my eyes and up my neck. I turned to my mom and asked if she knew about any of this, and she shook her head fast, swearing she had no idea and thought Megan took all the kids to a place that day because that's what she was told. My dad finally spoke, slow and careful, asking Megan if it was true. She hesitated, shrugged and said technically yes, but nothing happened. Lily was okay, and she wasn't a helpless baby. That was the last thread snapping. I turned and saw Lily standing in the hallway clutching her stuffed fox, watching everything like it couldn't possibly be real. I turned back toward Rachel and told her flat out that she'd instructed my daughter to lie to me, that she warned her keeping quiet was the only way not to ruin Christmas. Rachel tried to roll her eyes, but it didn't work this time. Her face was blotchy and her mouth kept twitching like she was losing control. She muttered that she just didn't want Emma making a big scene and threw in that I always blow things out of proportion. That's when her oldest, Josh, walked in with a huge grin, holding one of those oversized plastic bags from the toy store. He announced proudly, "Mommy, look what I found. This is the one we bought after the pizza place. Remember the day Emma had to stay in the car because you said she'd complain too much?" He stopped mid-sentence when he realized how quiet the room had become. Rachel's face drained completely, turning pale and stiff. My mom stepped back like she'd been hit, and my dad looked over at Emma, really looked at her for the first time all night. He walked over, knelt down, and asked her gently how long she'd been in the car that day. Emma didn't say a word. She just held up 4 fingers. That was enough. Nobody spoke after that, not even Rachel. Then my wife leaned toward me and quietly said to call Emma's godmother because she wasn't staying there another minute. I nodded without hesitation, didn't look back at anyone, and we walked out. Rachel didn't follow us, my mom didn't try to stop us, and my dad stayed silent. But just before we reached the door I heard my mom say Rachel's full name, first, middle and last. In that tone every kid knows means you crossed a line you can't undo. For once, Rachel didn't fire back. We dropped Emma off at her godmother Sarah's place on the way home. Sarah didn't ask a single question. She opened the door, took one look at Emma's face and nodded. That's the kind of friend she is. Emma didn't cry. She curled up on the couch, pulled a blanket to her chin, and turned up her favorite cartoon like nothing had happened. And that broke me more than anything because it meant she was used to pretending everything was fine. My wife and I got back in the car without speaking, driving past streets glowing with lights, inflatable snowmen, and porches trying their hardest to look joyful. While inside our car there was nothing but that hollow feeling you get when someone you trusted turns out to be someone else entirely. When we got home I didn't even take my coat off. I went straight into the kitchen, opened my laptop, and logged into the bank account I shared with Rachel. The one I'd opened 3 years earlier when she claimed she was getting back on her feet. She never really did. I'd covered her phone bill, paid her rent more than once, handled her car insurance countless times, funded birthday parties, Christmas gifts, and grocery runs when she forgot her wallet, always hearing the same promise that she'd pay me back later, a later that never came. I transferred my money out, froze the account, and started the paperwork to remove myself, all in about 10 minutes. I sat there staring at the screen afterward until my wife joined me, said nothing, and didn't need to. We didn't sleep that night, and every time I closed my eyes I saw Emma curled up in the back seat with her knees to her chest, waiting, and no child deserves that, especially not from family. By morning the calls started, first my mom leaving a shaky message asking me to call her back. Then my dad with a short voicemail saying we needed to talk about Rachel, and I ignored both. Then Rachel texted long paragraphs filled with anger and guilt, saying I made her look like a monster in front of her kids, that Emma was fine, that I always overreact, asking if I even understood the pressure she was under, accusing me of thinking I was perfect and saying I was the one who left Emma with her. I stared at the message for a long time while my wife read over my shoulder, sighed, and said she really thought she was the victim. I didn't respond or delete it. I left it there as a reminder of who she really was once the mask fell. Around noon my mom called again and this time I answered, and before I could speak she said they knew everything, that Josh had spoken up first and then Emma told them the rest. I asked what Rachel had said, and my mom admitted Rachel claimed she just wanted a few hours alone with her boys without watching someone else's kid. That was her truth and mine was simpler. I was done. I told my mom I was cutting Rachel off completely, no more gifts, no more bills, no more money, that the account was already closed. My mom didn't argue, she just said she didn't recognize her daughter anymore. and that they weren't excusing what she did. That afternoon I went through every closet and bag in the house, pulling out every gift meant for Rachel's boys, every stocking stuffer, board game, toy lightsaber and wrapped package, loading it all into the car and driving straight to the store. Whatever I couldn't return I donated, even the extra gloves I'd bought because Rachel once mentioned hers always went missing, the kind of small thing I used to remember because I was always covering her gaps. Not anymore. That night Emma came home, we ate spaghetti and garlic bread, sat in our pajamas watching The Grinch, and when she laughed again it felt like medicine. We didn't talk about Rachel because we didn't have to. But 2 days later, the day after Christmas, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when my wife looked out the window and came back she only said, "They're here." I opened the door to find my parents on the porch, and behind them, standing in the cold without a coat, was Rachel, holding a single gift like it was supposed to fix something. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside and pointed inside. Rachel didn't move, she stayed right where she was on the porch, eyes red, hair unbrushed, cheeks raw from the wind, clutching that one wrinkled, foil-wrapped present like she was waiting to be invited back into a life she'd already broken. The gift in her hands was crushed at one corner like she'd been gripping it too hard the entire drive over. And I knew right away it didn't matter what was inside because it wasn't meant for Emma. That present was just for show. Behind her, her car engine was still running, exhaust drifting up into the cold air like slow smoke signals, and I noticed immediately that the boys weren't in the car, which hit harder than I expected. She didn't even bring her kids, just herself in the performance. My parents stood between us, not bothering to hide the tension, my mom's mouth drawn tight while my dad couldn't bring himself to look at me. I opened the door just enough to let them inside, and when Rachel took a step forward like she planned to follow, I raised my hand and said only them. She froze. My parents walked in quietly and I shut the door behind them, the lock clicking louder than it should have. For a long minute nobody spoke. My mom stood there with her arms crossed like she was holding something back, and my dad sat down without really settling, perched on the edge of the couch like he was waiting for instructions. Finally my mom said Rachel wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating, that she kept pacing and whispering to herself, saying she'd made the worst mistake of her life. I didn't respond. My dad added that she wanted to apologize, that she was scared of how far this had gone. Gone, I repeated, looking at him, asking if he thought I was the one who took it too far. He said no quickly, that wasn't what he meant, and I told him they raised both of us so they should tell me who taught Rachel that if she ignored a problem long enough, someone else would clean it up for her. Neither of them answered, and my mom sat down pressing her hands to her face. Then the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Rachel closer now, holding that flattened gift with both hands like it proved she still deserved to be let in, her face pale from the cold. She said she didn't think I'd actually shut her out, and I leaned against the doorframe and waited. She cleared her throat and said she knew she messed up, but that this was getting ridiculous, that I had our parents inside like they were choosing sides, that I was returning gifts and cutting off the account. I corrected her and said I closed the account, which wasn't the same thing. She pushed the gift toward me and said she got it for Emma before everything happened and that it wasn't a bribe. I didn't take it. She stared at me, then let her hand drop, her voice lowering as she said I left Emma with her, that I trusted her and maybe that was stupid, but it wasn't like Emma was locked in a trunk. That stopped me cold and I asked her what she just said. She stumbled, saying people leave kids in cars all the time, and I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, telling her to say it again. She backed up, saying she didn't mean it like that, and I told her she wasn't sorry, she was just caught and that was the difference. She looked away, and I turned to go back inside when she said something I didn't expect, that she lost her job last week. I stopped and asked what, and she said that's why she took the boys to the mall, that she didn't want them to feel like anything was wrong, that she was scared and needed them to think everything was normal, that she didn't want them to see her falling apart, so she left Emma in the car just for a bit, and then it turned into hours. I didn't respond. She said she didn't tell me because she thought I'd look at her like this, like she was garbage. I stared at her and told her slowly that she could have told me she lost her job, her house, her mind, and I would have helped, but instead she left my daughter in the cold for 4 hours, that she didn't forget, she chose it. She had nothing to say after that. I told her to go home and not come back without a real apology, one that didn't talk about her pain, only Emma's. She didn't argue this time and walked back toward the car, but instead of getting in she leaned inside, said something to the driver, slammed the door, and the car pulled away, leaving Rachel alone on the sidewalk without a coat, holding that wrinkled little gift. Inside, I made tea for my parents and no one spoke for the first 15 minutes. Through the window I could see Rachel sit down on the curb waiting. We didn't invite her back in, not even when it started to snow. She stayed out there like she was trying to make a statement, though I don't think she even knew what it was anymore. At first I thought it was part of the act, sitting in the cold looking miserable to guilt someone into opening the door, because I'd seen her pull things like that before. Tantrums dressed up as remorse, tears followed by half apologies. But 20 minutes passed, then 30, and she was still there, unmoving. I watched from the living room as she pulled her knees tight and wrapped her arms around herself, the gift resting soggy in her lap with the wrapping torn at one corner from how tightly she'd been clutching it. She looked like a kid who missed the bus and didn't know who to call, and the snow kept falling, not a blizzard, just enough to soak in, clinging to her hair and shoulders before slowly melting down her back. And she still didn't leave. My mom sat on the couch gripping her tea with both hands, but she never took a sip, just stared down into the cup like it might somehow explain how things had gone so wrong. My dad sat next to her, quiet and steady, his face giving nothing away like always. After a while my mom said he's going to get frostbite, and I answered without hesitation that so did Emma. She flinched at that, but she didn't argue, and that silence from her was new. For the first time in my life, my mom didn't try to smooth it over or offer some tired excuse about stress or motherhood or how Rachel didn't mean it. Instead, she surprised me by saying we yelled at her. I looked up. She told me that night after we left they didn't let it slide, that they didn't comfort Rachel, that my dad was furious and raised his voice louder than she'd ever heard. He told Rachel she had no business watching someone else's child if she couldn't even protect her own, that she needed help. And then my mom paused and looked straight at me and said he told her he was ashamed of her. My dad stayed silent, but that silence said enough. In our house, that word carried weight. It was never tossed around, and he'd never used it on either of us growing up. Knowing he finally said it now, after years of soft landings and rescued mistakes, hit harder than I expected. My mom added quietly that Rachel cried for 2 hours, said she didn't want to be like this, said she just wanted to be seen as capable like me. I let out a breath that wasn't a laugh, just something bitter and tired, because Rachel always wanted the praise that comes with being responsible, but never wanted the responsibility itself. My mom nodded slowly, like she hated admitting it but couldn't deny it. She said Rachel wanted to come inside, that she hadn't said it out loud but it was obvious. I looked back out the window and saw Rachel still sitting there, snow collecting in the folds of her sweatshirt, her hair wet and stiff, her face pale. I said she wanted to be warm while Emma froze in the dark, so she could sit out there a while. My dad finally spoke then, saying this was the first time they hadn't defended her and that she noticed, maybe that's why she wasn't leaving. I didn't answer right away. Then I said she had every chance to tell the truth even after it happened, that she could have apologized, could have looked me in the eye and admitted she was scared, overwhelmed, stupid, and I still would have hated it, but maybe I could have forgiven her. Instead she lied, twisted things, blamed me. After that, no one spoke for a long time. Eventually my parents stood up. My mom set her untouched tea back on the table, and said they should go. I walked them to the door, and Rachel saw them through the window and started to stand, unsure if they were leaving her or bringing her in. They walked past her. She said something we couldn't hear, but they didn't stop. My dad got into the car, my mom paused by the passenger door, looked at Rachel, then looked at me and got in. The car idled for a moment, then pulled away and disappeared down the street, and Rachel stayed right where she was, alone. She eventually stood up from the curb but didn't leave right away, pacing in small circles in the snow, rubbing her arms like it would help, her hair plastered to her face. At one point she looked back at the door, not like she expected me to open it, but like she still couldn't understand why I hadn't. I didn't give her the satisfaction of watching her anymore. I moved away from the window, made cocoa for Emma, lit a candle in the kitchen and swept the floor, because that's what you do when someone finally runs out of chances. You keep living, you stop waiting for them to change, and you let them carry their own weight. Eventually she was gone. I never saw a car come for her. Maybe someone did, maybe she walked, but by morning the only thing left was a wet patch on the curb where she'd been sitting. The gift was still there on the porch, soggy and misshapen, like some last attempt at peace. One corner of the box had split open, whatever was inside clearly ruined. The foil wrapping turned to mush. I left it there all day. Emma didn't ask about it and never mentioned her aunt again. The next morning I scooped it up with a snow shovel and dropped it straight into the trash. No note, no curiosity, just garbage where it belonged. A week later I got a text from a number I didn't recognize, no name, just a message saying I'm trying. Please don't give up on me. I stared at it for a long time and didn't respond. Rachel always treated apologies like emergency tools, pulled out only after the damage was done, always expecting everyone to go back to pretending nothing happened, but not this time. Emma moved on faster than I expected, stopped flinching when people talked about the holidays, even asked if she could have her godmother's daughter over for a sleepover, and I said yes. I watched them laugh on the couch, make popcorn, and wrap themselves in blankets like burritos, and that's when I really felt it, the peace, no tightness in my chest, no waiting for another call asking for help just one more time. No guilt for saying no, no fear that if I trusted someone with my child I'd never hear the truth. That's what I got back when I cut Rachel off, the ability to breathe the way a parent should. A few months later a letter showed up in the mailbox with no return address or stamp, just folded paper and her handwriting on the front, my full name written in shaky cursive. I stood in the kitchen holding it for several minutes, feeling the weight of it, knowing it was full of words she thought might change things, words she probably practiced, maybe cried over, maybe not. I held it over the sink, struck a match, and watched it curl and burn into ash, not out of anger, but because I didn't need it, because nothing in that envelope could undo what she did. That's what people like Rachel never understand. Forgiveness doesn't come from sitting in the cold or writing the perfect apology. It doesn't come wrapped in a gift or sent in a late-night text. And it sure as hell doesn't come after telling a 7-year-old to lie to her parent. Real forgiveness takes work, humility, time, and accountability, and she never did the work. She just performed the fall. And I don't owe her applause. So no, I never forgave Rachel, not because I like holding grudges, but because she never truly asked to be forgiven. She just wanted back in and the door stayed closed.